Hi, this is Alexander Scott, a member of LANS, presenting this edition of our weekly updates. Before we continue, please visit our website at jalans.org or follow us on social media. Our Twitter handle is @lans_ja. First, we will start with transparency in the public sector. On Sunday, February 28th, the Gleaner carried an article titled "Access Denied. Transparency Advocates Surprised at State's Refusal to Disclose Tax Police Commissioners' Contracts." And in this article, it was reported that an access to information request and ATI request for the contracts of both the head of the tax department and the head of the police force, respectively, were refused. These denials were met with surprise and shock on the part of transparency advocates, who stated that for reasons of transparency, it is urgent that these contracts and the details within them be outlined. This, while the former police chief, Owen Ellington, agreed with the call to not make the contracts public, as the matter, quote, would have been considered and denied for good reason, end quote. Following this, the Gleaner had a piece titled PM, Public Should See Commish Contracts, but. And in this piece, the Prime Minister said that while he himself is for the public seeing these contracts in question, he is at the same time wondering if the information within them, if the contracts can be made public as simply as that. As simply as handing them over when a request is made, and if there may be legal hurdles to overcome before these contracts can be shared publicly. He also continued by stating that he would be asking the Attorney General to explain the legal issues and hurdles which have to be addressed so these documents can be released, as well as to see if the hurdles can be lessened in order to have documents made public. Now, this behavior by the government is not new. Irrespective of which party is in power, there is a constant refusal to be transparent on topics with the people, and this is in the end followed up by promises of transparency at a later date, once legislation is passed, of course. We at LANS condemn this lack of openness, and we support the calls for the public release of these contracts of these two individuals. Pressure must be put on the government to not only release the information, but to also totally revamp the access to information process in order to ensure that information such as this is released in a speedier fashion, and that if it is not released, then a proper explanation is given as to why. We are a country where corruption within the police force remains an open secret, and where the paying of taxes by big businesses and big individuals remains voluntary because no charges are brought, and no charges are brought invariably because they are protected by persons in high places. And while we are in no way suggesting that the police commissioner and the head of the tax authority are corrupt, we are saying that transparency, especially with their contracts and the benefits and add-ons in them, would provide that one more layer of transparency in showing that they are not corrupt, that they are doing their job properly, and that we can in fact take them seriously, that they are not accessing a lifestyle beyond their means, and that when they do say and make actions, we can rest easy in the knowledge that they're doing them for the right things. This unwillingness on the part of officials to be transparent is exemplified with some of our politicians who refuse to make their annual declarations, their annual statutory declarations, and it shows once again that these politicians do not operate with either our interests in mind, or even by the same rules which we as citizens are beholden to. If we are to build a society free from corruption, then transparency and making access to critical information easier is really needed, especially when it comes to those who lead us or head our government agencies. It is high time that these people realize that they are our servants, that they work for us, and that when we make what is on the face of it a really reasonable request, it should be followed through on, or at the very least explained to us why that cannot happen. Next, we will discuss the government's recently announced COVID-19 vaccination plan. The health minister recently announced what the vaccination plan would look like, that is, how it would be implemented, and which groups are to be included in each phase. Now, according to a Gleaner article titled Health Minister Outlines COVID-19 Vaccination Rollout Plan, the vaccine will be issued in 3 phases. Phase 1 will comprise of government officials, frontline workers, the elderly, other government workers such as firemen, police officers, persons in government care, so persons within our prison system. Phase 2, as well as our teachers. Phase 2 will see groups such as hotel workers, bank employees, farmers, and transport workers being vaccinated, while Phase 3 will see the general population being given the vaccine. And that phase 3, will be implemented in a rolling fashion. The article also stated that the government is seeking some 3.5 million doses to inoculate 65% of the population by next year, March. Meanwhile, RJR has reported that there has been a delay with the vaccines from India, that is the 50,000 vaccines that were supposed to be arriving from India, and that instead of arriving on Thursday, February 4th, they will instead be arriving the following Monday. The health minister did, however, state that the vaccination program is set to begin 48 hours after the first shipment arrives, and the article in which the health minister made that statement also noted that March 11th should see the arrival of some 14,400 doses under the COVAX facility. That is, we would be getting our first shipments through that facility. Now, we welcome this announcement. It is also good to see that in this announcement we were advised of the procedure in its entirety and how long it is estimated to take. That is, we were told how long from start to finish the inoculation process should take. It's also great news, for example, that teachers and hotel workers are now viewed as priority and will now be included in Phase 1. This will allow us to resume face-to-face teaching, helping to end the increasing education gap, which COVID-19 has only made worse, and allow for the accepting of more tourists, which will have the benefit of boosting the economy. We do note, however, that shop workers, supermarket workers, and other retail workers are not in the first phase set to be vaccinated, and we believe that this needs to be rethought. These workers make up the bulk of the workforce in this country, and they are in constant interaction with other people simply because of the nature of their jobs and how they need to get to them. Now, while we don't expect all of them to be included because of the amount we have hamstrung ourselves to, the amount that we've limited ourselves to, it seems that we're refusing to access the vaccines made in Russia and China and Cuba. We do feel that some of these workers can and should be included in the Phase 1 rollout, just as the teachers were bumped up to Phase 1 from Phase 2. Doing this would give us a better chance of clamping down on the virus on a whole, while also ensuring that people can keep going to their jobs and going to their jobs in a safe fashion. Finally, we will end with education. The Jamaica Observer carried a piece called Disaster. UNICEF study shows education deficit in Caribbean and Latin America worst worldwide, which stated that Latin America and the Caribbean make up some 60% of all children who have missed an entire academic year due to COVID. The article also noted that children are missing out on more than simply an education, and this is because schools provide spaces for emotional development, among other things, as well as providing spaces which are not readily available at home, that is, if at all, of the students. Now, on the positive side, the article pointed to areas where teachers have become more trained in the mode of online teaching and have become more willing to practice online teaching, and that some parents and students are in fact expressing a desire to see online teaching remain in the long term once the pandemic ends. Now, in a related article, again in the Jamaica Observer, this time titled "Prepare for New Wave of Criminals, Misery," Professor Anthony Clayton and Dr. Herbert Gale are both warning that the education deficits we are currently facing in primary and secondary schools, which is being made worse by the COVID pandemic, will see Jamaica left with, and I quote, "a new wave of criminals and miserable citizens," end quote. This, they say, is in light of the fact that COVID has seen children, mainly poor children, unable to access either internet or electronics to go to classes, and has also seen a wave of students leave the education system in order to work. They note that this is going to create a generation of unemployable individuals who, while they may have the work experience, do not have the certification, and that is going to leave them either unemployable or in a position to be grossly underpaid. And that as a result, they're going to find it harder to make ends meet in the legal sector and may very well turn to crime. This article now, it comes after the security minister almost a month ago highlighted the fact that a total revamp of schools are in fact needed, and went on to state that some 20 schools, and I quote, had a very high recurrence rate of incarcerated individuals, end quote. Now, these news reports, that is, the widening education gap and the potential for a surge in crime, which the academics have predicted, are not one-offs and have been a constant for decades. It is common knowledge that education and attaining higher levels of education ties in with a higher likelihood of not engaging in crime. That is, if you have higher degree of education, so if you finish primary school, you're less likely to engage in crime as a person who has not finished primary school. If you finish secondary school, you're less likely to engage in crime as a person who has not finished secondary school, and so on and so forth. This is common knowledge. It's also common knowledge that attaining a good education leads to a better paying job in comparison to a person who does not have the same education. This is, again, common knowledge. Our schools are woefully underfunded to the point of embarrassment in many instances. And our teachers are so poorly paid that we have a really hard time in retaining them. They either leave when they first get the chance, or they just simply choose to drop out and not teach anymore. We as a group believe more must be done to fix this. More investment must be provided to the schools so they can be properly outfitted and staffed so they can teach the students. And the teachers must be given proper and decent remuneration which will see us retaining them so they can again teach our students. On top of that, serious investment must be done to ensure that both students and teachers are able to access online classes, as again, this is the way of the future. Online teaching is going to be here to stay. All of this is low-hanging fruit. We complain about a lack of productivity as a nation, and we complain about a crime. Both of these can be treated. Not solved immediately, but definitely treated if we fix our education system, and it is something that we must push our politicians to do. We at Lands hope that this whole pandemic and the fiasco of the education system along with it will act as the signal which is needed, and we'll see the government invest majorly in both primary and secondary education, as these areas, if invested in, along with other areas such as building up communities, will see us dealing with the long-term issues which have been affecting us. Now, before we end, I just want to say this week, that is March 5th, marked the 8th year since Hugo Chavez, the former Venezuelan president, a true friend of Jamaica and the region, died. We at Lands wish to pay respect to his legacy and the Bolivarian revolution which he has left behind and which remains strong and intact. Long live the Bolivarian revolution. Long live Comandante Chavez.